I'd planned this meal for 2 weeks, and my mother-in-law had been complaining about my cooking, said I was getting lazy, that I used too much takeout, that a proper wife knows how to feed her family. So I'd gone all in 0.6 pounds of premium rack, fresh herbs from the farmer's market, a red wine reduction that took 45 minutes just to reduce properly. Robert came home from work, sniffed the air, and actually smiled at me for the first time in a week. Smells amazing, Beck. I felt a flicker of that old warmth. The one that had kept me going through 15 years of marriage, through 2 kids who barely called anymore, through a mother-in-law who treated me like I'd crawled out from under a rock. I set the platter on the table. The meat was glistening, piled high, enough for all 6 of us with leftovers for my lunch tomorrow. My father-in-law, Harold Hayes, walked in from the backyard without washing his hands. He's 71, retired from some mid-level management job he still talks about like he ran a Fortune 500 company. He glanced at the table, then walked straight to the kitchen cabinet and pulled out a giant plastic storage container, the kind you use for freezing chili in bulk. Before I could say anything, he'd scooped about 4 pounds of lamb into that container. The tongs scraped against the platter like nails on a chalkboard. Your sister-in-law's pregnant, he announced, as if this explained everything. She's been craving red meat. I'm taking this over to her place. And he walked out the front door. No, thank you. No, is that okay? Just took it, like it was his right. The front door clicked shut. I stared at the platter. What was left was mostly bones, a few shreds of meat clinging to the edges, and some congealing sauce. My mother-in-law, Margaret Hayes, sat down at the table without comment. She unfolded her napkin, placed it on her lap, and reached for the 1 serving spoon we owned that hadn't been taken. Well, she said, at least we have something. Robert sat across from me. He looked at the platter, then at me, then back at the platter. His mouth opened and closed once. Dad's just being helpful, he said finally. You know how he is with Annie. Annie, the golden child, the one who'd been born 18 months after Robert and had never let anyone forget she was the favorite. When we bought our first house, Annie had borrowed our down payment savings for a medical emergency that turned out to be a luxury vacation to Cabo. When Robert had tried to confront her, my mother-in-law had cried for 3 days and my father-in-law had called Robert ungrateful. I swallowed the rest of my wine in one gulp. It tasted like vinegar. I spent 3 hours on those ribs, I said. My voice was flat. That surprised me. I'd expected to scream or cry or throw something. Instead, I just felt hollow. I know, honey. Robert reached across the table and patted my hand. The gesture was automatic, like he was calming a nervous dog. We can get more next weekend. It's just meat, right? Just meat. Just meat. I looked at my husband's face. 15 years. We'd been together since I was 27. I'd supported him through grad school, through his father's heart attack that turned out to be a panic attack, through Annie's 2 divorces and 3 career changes. I'd worked full-time while raising 2 kids who now texted me maybe once a month. I'd put my own career on hold so he could take that promotion that required 60-hour weeks. I'd done all of it quietly, without complaint, because that's what a good wife does. And for what? So his father could walk into my kitchen and take what I'd made like I was a caterer he'd hired for the evening? I didn't say anything else. I ladled the remaining broth into a bowl, drank it in silence, then washed every single dish by hand and I scrubbed that platter until my knuckles were raw. The hot water burned, but I didn't turn it down. When I was done, I walked into the bedroom, opened my closet, and packed 1 bag. Jeans, 2 sweaters, underwear, my laptop, my birth control pills. Not that Robert and I had had sex in 3 months, and the small jewelry box my grandmother had left me. Robert was in the living room watching ESPN. When I came out, he glanced up, saw the bag, and his face went through 6 different expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion first, then annoyance, like I was being dramatic, then a flash of something that might have been panic. Where are you going? To my parents' house. For what? He actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he was uncomfortable. The laugh was his defense mechanism. I'd seen it 1,000 times. Because I need to think. About what? About how much longer I can stay married to someone who watches his father take food off his wife's table and says it's just meat. That shut him up for about 3 seconds. Beck, come on. You're overreacting. It's a family thing. Dad was trying to help Annie. You know pregnancy cravings are intense. And he didn't take all of it. There was nothing left. My voice finally cracked. Just a little. There was nothing left for me. Nothing left for you. Nothing left for anyone but Annie. Your father literally took the food out of our mouths and walked out without asking, and you defended him. Robert stood up. He's 6'2", broad-shouldered, the kind of man who takes up space without meaning to. Usually I found that comforting. Right now it felt threatening. You want me to fight my father over lamb? His voice was rising. What is wrong with you? Nothing, I said. There's nothing wrong with me. That's what you don't get. Robert, I have spent 15 years, being the bigger person, being the understanding wife, being the one who just lets things go because it's not worth the drama. And I'm done. The drive to my parents' house took 40 minutes. My mother, Sarah Mitchell, opened the door before I could knock. She said she'd had a feeling. Mothers know. They always know. She wrapped me in a hug that smelled like fabric softener and warm bread. She didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside, gave me a glass of water, and sat me down at the kitchen table while she made me a grilled cheese sandwich. My father, David Mitchell, came down from his workshop. He'd been refinishing some old dresser. He'd started woodworking after retiring from the fire department, and it had become his therapy. He took one look at my face and said, "Where's Robert?" "He's at home watching TV." "Is he coming to get you?" "He doesn't even know I'm gone yet." "Well, he probably figured it out when I pulled out of the driveway." My father's jaw clenched. He has that old school firefighter instinct, the one that wants to fix everything with blunt force. He's 74 now, still built like he could carry a grown man out of a burning building, but he's learned to hold his tongue, mostly. "You want to talk about it?" he asked, sitting across from me. I took a bite of the sandwich. It was perfect, golden brown, cheese stretching in long strings. I realized I hadn't eaten anything except that broth. He took my lamb, I said. Harold walked in with a plastic container and took most of what I'd cooked for dinner. Didn't ask, didn't thank me, just said Annie was pregnant and took it. My mother put her hand over mine. How did Robert react? He told me not to make a big deal out of it. My parents exchanged a look. IT wasn't a we told Zoe looked at IT was a look of shared disappointment. They never fully trusted Robert, not because he was a bad man, but because they could see what I wouldn't admit to myself for years. He was weak when it came to his family. The kind of weak that made him complicit in everything they did. Rebecca. My mother's voice was soft but direct. You know you can stay as long as you need to, but we need to know. What do you want to do? That was the question I'd been avoiding. What did I want? I wanted a husband who stood up for me. Did I wanted a family that didn't treat me like a resource to be mined? I wanted 15 years of my life back. But since time travel wasn't an option, I had to figure out what was actually possible. I don't know yet, I admitted. I just know I couldn't stay there tonight. My father nodded slowly. Good enough for now. The next morning, my phone started buzzing at 7. I knew it was Robert before I looked. The ringtone was his custom one, some generic pop song he'd picked because he thought it was fun. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. And again. At 8, the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and pretending everything was normal. My mother was doing the crossword. My father was in the workshop. It was a fake normal, but I was clinging to it. The doorbell wasn't a polite ring. It was an aggressive press hold, press hold, press. The kind that says, I'm not leaving until you open this door. My father came up from the workshop, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at me. I nodded. He opened the door. Harold Hayes stormed in first. He was wearing his I'm the patriarch of this family jacket, a leather bomber he'd bought in the 90s and still thought made him look intimidating. Behind him came Margaret, her face pinched like she'd sucked a lemon, and behind her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, was Robert. They filled my parents' living room like an occupying army. The space that had felt cozy and safe the night before now felt claustrophobic. There she is, Harold barked, pointing at me like I was a fugitive he'd finally tracked down, the great escape artist. You think you can just run off to your parents' house because you didn't get your way? I stood up. My coffee mug was warm in my hands. I set it down carefully on the table because I didn't trust myself not to throw it. I didn't get my way. I repeated. I spent 3 hours making dinner for this family, and you walked in and took it all without asking. You didn't even leave enough for the people who actually live in that house, and I'm the one who's being unreasonable. You little. Harold's face was turning purple. That was for Annie. She's pregnant with my grandchild. Then why didn't you just ask? It's a fucking family dinner. He was yelling now, the kind of yell that was meant to shut me up, to remind me that in his world, he was the one who got to make decisions. We're all family. Family shares. What's wrong with you that you can't understand that? My father stepped forward. Harold, you need to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down, Dave. Your daughter's the one who. She's my daughter. My father's voice was low, controlled, and somehow more terrifying than Harold's yelling. And you're in my house. You will speak to her with respect, or you will leave. Harold opened his mouth, then closed it. He wasn't used to being pushed back against. In his world, people backed down when he got loud. Margaret stepped forward. She had that let me handle this expression she used when she was pretending to be the reasonable one. Rebecca, dear, we know you're upset, but you have to understand, Annie's hormones are all over the place. She's been having terrible cravings. Harold was just trying to help. He didn't mean any harm. Of course she was defending him. Margaret had been defending Harold's behavior for 45 years. Why would she stop now? Your husband took food off my table, I said slowly, without asking, without thanking me, and left nothing for anyone else. And you're telling me I need to understand. Honey, Robert stepped forward. He was doing that thing where he put his hands up like he was calming a wild animal. Come on, let's just go home and talk about this reasonably. Reasonably, I echoed. Like how you reasonably let your father take my lamb. Like how you reasonably let your sister borrow my grandmother's pearls 2 years ago and then blamed me when I wanted them back. Like how you reasonably let your mother borrow $3,000 from our savings account for emergencies that turned out to be Annie's cosmetic surgery. Robert flinched. Those were different situations. They were the same situation. My voice was rising now, and I'd spent so many years trying to be calm, trying to be the bigger person, trying to let things slide, but there was no big person left. There was just me, and I was done. The same pattern. You let them take whatever they want, you make excuses for them. You tell me I'm the unreasonable one. And when I finally stand up for myself, you bring your whole family to my parents' house to bully me into submission. The living room fell silent. Harold was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Margaret's mouth was pressed into a thin line. Robert looked like someone had just told him his dog died. But the person I was really looking at was Annie. She'd come in behind them, so I hadn't noticed at first. She'd been lurking in the doorway, probably enjoying the show. She was 38, blonde, pretty in that I've never had to try away. Her belly was just starting to show under her expensive sweater. Wow, Beck, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I didn't know you were this upset about the lamb. You should have just said something. I would have shared it with you. Shared it with me. I stared at her. I made it. You didn't share anything with me. I didn't ask Dad to bring it over, you know. She put her hand on her belly. I'm just trying to do what's best for the baby. The doctor said, I need more protein. You're a mother. You get it. I did get it. I got it more than she knew. But I also knew that Annie had been just trying to do what's best for the baby for 3 years now, long before she was pregnant. She'd used her first pregnancy, her second miscarriage, her divorce, her career stress, and now this pregnancy as a constant excuse to take whatever she wanted from me. Annie, I said, I am done being your personal supply line. I'm done being your family servant. And I'm done pretending that any of this is okay. Harold pointed a finger at me. You will not speak to my daughter that way. Then you should have taught her basic manners. Because right now, she's a 38-year-old woman who still lets her daddy steal food from someone else's house for her. After they left, Harold storming out, Margaret trailing behind him, Annie casting a final smug glance my way, and Robert hesitating at the door like he couldn't decide which side he was on, I sat down on my parents' couch and stared at the wall. The confrontation had felt good, liberating, but now that the adrenaline was fading, I was left with the cold reality of what I'd just done. I declared war on my husband's family. I'd humiliated his father in front of his mother. I'd publicly called out his sister. And Robert had left with them. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't even tried to mediate. He just stood there, silent and passive, and let his father treat me like a defiant child. My mother brought me another cup of coffee. That took courage, she said quietly. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. My father sat down on the other end of the couch. He was holding his phone, scrolling through something. You've got about 12 missed calls from Robert, he said, not looking up. Plus about 20 texts from his mother. I don't want to talk to them. Then you won't. He set his phone down. But you need to think about what comes next. This isn't going to go away. I know. I knew better than anyone. The Hayes family didn't give up. They didn't back down. They just kept pushing slowly and relentlessly until you caved. But this time, I wasn't caving. The next 2 days were a blur of phone calls, text messages, and the slow erosion of my sanity. Robert called me 47 times. I counted. I stopped answering after the first 3 because his messages were all variations of come home and I'm sorry and why are you doing this? But he was sorry for the wrong things. He was sorry that I was upset. He wasn't sorry about the lamb. He wasn't sorry about 15 years of being treated like a secondary character in his own family's drama. He was just sorry that I'd stopped playing along. Margaret started the social media campaign. She posted photos of family dinner at Annie's house, the lamb she'd cooked, the baby bump, the smiling family, with captions about the joys of family togetherness. Passive-aggressive, calculated. Designed to show the world what a perfect family they were, and by implication, what a monster I was for walking away. Annie chimed in from her iPhone, post after post. Being a mother means putting your baby first. Baby bottle hashtag, just saying. Some people just don't understand what family means. She never tagged me directly. She didn't have to. Anyone who knew us knew exactly who she was talking about. My high school friend Emily texted me a screenshot of the comments thread. Girl, she wrote, I think your sister-in-law just called you out on Instagram. I looked at the screenshot. Annie's friend, some woman I'd never met, had posted, you deserve better, girl. Family drama is the worst. And Annie had replied with a heart emoji and thanks, sis. At least I know who my real family is. I sent Emily back a single emoji, upside down face. Because what else could I do? I could scream, that I could cry, that I could post my own side of the story. But that was what she wanted. She wanted a fight, because in a fight, her family would rally around her, and they'd make me the villain again. On the 3rd day, Robert showed up at my parents' house alone. He knocked this time, didn't use his key, didn't let himself in. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes. The same shirt he'd been wearing the last time I saw him. Beck, he said when my father let him in, please, just talk to me. My father looked at me. I nodded. We sat in the kitchen. My parents had gone to the living room, which was a small mercy. They didn't trust themselves not to intervene. I've been thinking, Robert started. He rubbed his face with both hands. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about the patterns, about my family, and I think you're right. The words hung between us. I don't want to be like them, he continued. I don't want to be the guy who lets his parents walk all over his wife. I've just been so used to it, you know? It's how I grew up. Dad's always in charge, mom's always cleaning up after him, and you just go along with it. I waited. There was a but coming. I could feel it. But I need you to understand, Beck. I'm in the middle here. They're my parents. They're not going to change just because I ask them to. And if I cut them off, if you cut them off, if I take your side completely, I lose my whole family. And I can't. I just can't do that. I should have felt sympathy. I really should have. This was a man who was genuinely struggling, genuinely torn between his wife and his parents. This was complicated. This was human. But all I felt was exhaustion. Robert, I said, I'm not asking you to cut them off. I'm asking you to stand up to them. I'm asking you to make a choice. The choice to be my husband instead of their enabler. How am I supposed to do that? By telling your father that stealing food from someone who cooked it is wrong. By telling your mother that our money isn't her emergency fund for your sister. By telling your sister that she's an adult and she needs to start acting like one. Robert was quiet for a long time. And if they don't listen, then you might have to choose. I met his eyes. And Robert, I need you to know, if you don't choose me, I will choose myself. Robert left my parents' house that evening without a resolution. He didn't choose me. He didn't choose them. He just left. Said he needed time to think. Said he loved me. Said he'd call tomorrow. I watched his taillights disappear down the street and felt something click into place inside my chest. Not a crack, but a lock. The kind that doesn't open again. That night, I couldn't sleep and I lay in my old childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 12. Most of them had fallen off over the years, but a few still clung there, faint and useless. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through our joint bank account history. Not because I expected to find anything, I just needed something to do. Something that felt like action. 3 years of transactions that I'd never really looked closely before. Robert handled the big stuff, mortgage, insurance, his retirement fund. I handled groceries, utilities, the kids' college contributions, the boring, day-to-day bleed. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. I started with the recent one's $500 to mom and dad on the first of every month. That was the allowance we'd agreed on when Harold retired. Margaret said they needed help with prescriptions and property taxes. I never questioned it. But as I scrolled further back, I noticed something odd. The transfers weren't always the same amount. Some months it was $800, some months it was $1,200. And there were extra lump sums, $2,000 here, $3,000 there, with vague memos like family gift or holiday fund. I checked the dates against my own calendar. The extra payments always lined up with something: Annie's birthday, Annie's first divorce settlement, Annie's down payment assistance for her new condo, Annie's cosmetic surgery, the one Margaret had told me was a medical necessity for her chronic back pain. I felt cold. Not angry yet, just cold. I opened my spreadsheet app and started logging every payment to Robert's parents for the last 36 months. I cross-referenced with Annie's life events, with text messages I still had, with the scraps of conversations I'd overheard at family dinners. The total hit me like a slap. $23,000. In 3 years, $23,000 of our money, my money too, since I'd been working full-time the whole time, had flowed directly into the Hayes family coffers. And what had we gotten for it? A few strained Thanksgivings, a lot of passive-aggressive comments about my cooking, and the distinct privilege of being treated like the help. But here's the part that made my stomach turn. Robert had never told me about the extra amounts. He'd never asked. He'd just authorized them, one after another, like it was his duty. Like I didn't have a say in how our household income was spent. I sat up in bed. My phone screen was the only light in the room, and it cast harsh shadows on the walls. I texted my old college roommate, Jenna, who works as a financial analyst. Not to vent, to ask a favor. Jen, can you help me trace where a bank transfer actually lands? Like, can you see if a specific account is receiving regular deposits from another one? She replied within seconds. Depends on the info. What are we looking for? I explained the situation. Not the marital drama, just the simple question: are Harold and Margaret Hayes actually living on what they say they are, or is our money being funneled elsewhere? Jenna asked for the account numbers I could see on our statements that I gave her the routing numbers that showed up as mom and dad in our transaction history. She said she'd check public records, cross-reference with known bank aliases, and get back to me. Don't expect a miracle, she texted, but if they're doing something obvious, it'll show. The next morning, I woke up to a different kind of chaos. Margaret had started the group chat, the one that included me, Robert, Annie, and about 6 extended family members. The message was long, rambling, and drenched in martyrdom. I never thought I'd see the day when a daughter-in-law would tear this family apart over a meal. We raised Robert to value family above everything. We opened our home to Rebecca. We treated her like our own, and now she's turned her back on us because of a misunderstanding. I'm heartbroken, but I'm also praying for her. God knows she needs it. Annie replied within 2 minutes. Mom, you're a saint. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Cousin Linda chimed in. Some people just don't appreciate what they have. Uncle Mark, family is everything. Shame on her. I stared at the screen. 12 people, all piling on, all knowing exactly one side of the story. I could have defended myself. I could have posted screenshots of Harold taking the lamb. I could have listed every time they'd taken money from us without asking. But I didn't. Instead, I typed one line: I'm happy to discuss this in person with a neutral third party. Anyone want to volunteer? Then I put my phone on silent and went to make coffee. By noon, Robert was at my parents' door again. This time, he looked less like a man seeking reconciliation and more like a man carrying a bomb. They're freaking out, he said, stepping inside without being invited. My mom's been crying all morning, and my dad's threatening to cut me out of the will. Annie's saying she's going to go into early labor because of the stress. I didn't offer him a seat. And what do you want me to do about that, Robert? I want you to come home. His voice cracked. I want you to just come home and let this blow over. I'll talk to them. I'll make them understand. You've been saying that for 15 years. This time it's different. How? He couldn't answer. He just stood there, fists clenched at his sides, looking like a man who'd run out of bridges to burn and was hoping I'd build him a new one. Rebecca. My father appeared in the hallway. He'd clearly been listening. Can I have a word with Robert alone? I hesitated, then nodded. I retreated to the kitchen, but I left the door cracked. I wanted to hear what my father would say to the man who'd been failing his daughter for over a decade. Robert, my father said, his voice low and steady, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone else. When Rebecca was 12, she broke her arm falling out of a tree. I was at work. Your mother-in-law took her to the ER, sat with her for 5 hours, and didn't call me until it was all over. She said she didn't want to worry me. That was her instinct, protecting me from the hard stuff. Rebecca inherited that instinct. She spent 15 years protecting you from the hard stuff, protecting you from your own family. And you've let her. Silence. Now she's done protecting you, my father continued. And you're standing here asking her to start again. That's not love, Robert. That's using her. I heard Robert's sharp exhale. When he spoke, his voice was thick. I don't know how to fix this. Then stop trying to fix it. Start by telling the truth to yourself first, then to them. Because until you admit that your family is broken, you can't protect anyone. Robert left after that. He didn't go back to his parents. I knew because I checked his location on our shared Find My app. He went to a park near our old house and sat on a bench for 3 hours. I watched his little dot on the map, immobile, and wondered what was going through his head. While he was sitting there, Jenna called me. Hey, I've got something. I grabbed a notebook and pen. Tell me. That account you gave me, the one you've been sending money to, it's not in Harold or Margaret's names. It's in Annie's. I felt the air leave my lungs. You're sure? Positive. The routing number matches a personal checking account opened 5 years ago under Annie M. Hayes. No joint holders. No other signatories. Just her. So, every payment we made to Mom and Dad went straight to Annie. She's been the sole beneficiary of your generosity for at least 3 years, and based on the deposit patterns, I guess Harold and Margaret knew exactly what they were doing. The transfers weren't disguised. They just weren't marked clearly. Your husband probably never thought to check the account holder's name. I leaned against the kitchen counter. My knees were weak. Can you see outgoing transfers from that account? Only if I had authorization, she said, but I can tell you the incoming total for this year alone. It's over $12,000. And there's another regular deposit from an account I'm guessing is your father-in-law's retirement fund. S.O. Annie is getting money from both of you and from her parents. The picture was clear now. Harold and Margaret weren't just taking our money to help themselves. They were acting as a conduit, a middleman funneling everything to the golden child. Jenna, I owe you dinner for life. You owe me a story when this is over. And Rebecca, be careful. If they're this organized about money, they're organized about everything else too. I didn't tell Robert right away. I wanted to hold on to the knowledge for a while, to feel its weight, to decide what to do with it. But that evening, Annie herself provided the perfect opportunity. She showed up at my parents' house, alone this time, no entourage. She was wearing a cashmere wrap that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and she had the audacity to look sympathetic. Beck, I know we've had our differences, she said, settling onto our couch like she owned it. But I really do care about you, and I think we need to talk woman to woman. My mother hovered in the doorway, ready to intervene. I shook my head slightly. I could handle this. Talk about what, Annie? About Robert. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. He's been so stressed lately. He told me he feels like he's failing everyone. And I just think if you could be a little more understanding, a little more flexible, maybe things would get easier for him. I almost laughed. Almost. Flexible, I repeated. Like how I was flexible when you borrowed my grandmother's pearls and never returned them? Or flexible when your mom took $3,000 from our savings account without asking? Annie's smile flickered. Those were different things. Were they? Because the money went to you, didn't it, Annie? Every extra payment we made to Mom and Dad. It ended up in your account. Her face went pale. The smugness evaporated like water on a hot stove. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshot Jenna had sent me, and held it up for her to see. That's your bank account number, isn't it? The one that's been receiving our monthly parent support payments for the last 3 years. Annie stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. That's not. My parents asked me to hold on to some money for them, for safekeeping. For safekeeping, I echoed. For 3 years, $12,000 a year, while they told us they were struggling to pay for prescriptions. You don't understand. Her voice was sharp now, defensive. I have a baby on the way. I needed the help. And Robert wanted to help. He told me he was fine with it. That stopped me cold. Robert knew. Annie's eyes darted away. He knew we were getting money. He didn't ask where it came from. He just said to take what we needed. I let Annie leave after that. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, while she gathered her wrap and her keys and walked out the door without another word. Robert had known, not necessarily the details. Maybe he didn't know it was his parents' account funneling to Annie, but he'd known his sister was receiving money from somewhere and he'd authorized it. Without telling me, without asking, without even pretending we were a partnership. That night, I called him, not to fight, to ask a question. Robert, when you said you were sorry about the lamb, what exactly were you sorry for? He paused, for not standing up to Dad. And what about everything else? The money, the years of taking, the fact that your sister has been living off our savings while we struggled to pay the kids' tuition. Beck, I told you I didn't know the details. But you knew she was getting help. You knew your parents were taking more than we agreed on, and you never told me. You let me believe it was for prescriptions, for property taxes, for their own basic needs. You let me worry about their health while you were quietly funding your sister's lifestyle. Silence. I could hear him breathing, slow and heavy. I was trying to keep the peace, he finally said. No, Robert. You were trying to keep their peace, and you sacrificed mine to do it. I hung up before he could reply. Then I opened my laptop and started making a list, not of grievances, of facts, dates, amounts, text messages, screenshots. Everything I'd need to prove what they'd done, not just to Robert, but to anyone who might ask. Because if I'd learned anything from 3 years of being the family punching bag, it was this. The only way to win against people who use guilt as a weapon is to stop feeling guilty. And the only way to stop feeling guilty is to face the truth head on. The truth was ugly. It was messy. It was full of people I'd trusted, people I'd loved, people who'd used that trust and love to bleed me dry. But I wasn't going to let them do it anymore. The next morning, I drove to our old house. I still had a key. Robert hadn't asked for it back. I let myself in while he was at work. The place looked different now. Not abandoned, exactly, but neglected. Dishes in the sink. Laundry piled on the couch. Mail stacked on the counter unopened. I went to the home office. Our shared desk, the filing cabinet where Robert kept the important documents. I never thought to look through it before. That was my mistake. I found what I was looking for in the bottom drawer, a folder labeled Family Financial. Inside were bank statements, credit card bills, and a small leather-bound notebook with Robert's handwriting. I flipped through the notebook. The IT was a log, dates, amounts, and brief notes. Paid Mom's doctor bill. Dad's car repair. Annie's down payment. But there were also entries that didn't match the story they told me. Annie's vacation fund. Mom's new car, partial. Dad's golf membership. And then, on the last page, a single sentence that made my blood run cold. If Beck finds out, she'll leave. I have to be smarter. He'd known, all along. He'd known what they were doing, known it would destroy our marriage, and he'd hidden it anyway. I took a photo of that page. Then I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. When Robert came home that evening, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. We need to talk, I said. And this time, you're going to tell me everything, and oh more half-dashed truths, and oh more protecting them. Or I promise you, by the end of this week, I'll have a lawyer and you'll never see me again. His face went white, but he sat down. And for the first time in 15 years, he started telling the truth. Robert sat on the edge of the couch like a man about to confess to a crime. His hands were clasped between his knees, knuckles white, and he wouldn't look at me. That was the first sign that this wasn't going to be a simple apology. I don't know where to start, he said. Start at the beginning. The real beginning. Not the story you've been telling yourself. He took a breath, held it, let it out. When we first got married, my dad sat me down. He said, "Robert, you're the head of your household now, but you're also still my son, and I expect you to help your sister however you can. She's going to need support. She's a woman. She's not as capable as you are." I felt my jaw tighten. He said that. Word for word. And I believed it. I grew up hearing that Annie was fragile, that she needed extra help, that my job was to make sure she was taken care of. It was just the way things were. Go on. So when she got into financial trouble, I helped small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there. But then she lost her job after the first divorce, and my parents said she was going to lose her apartment. They asked me to cover her rent for 6 months. How much? $15,000. Total. Over 2 years. My vision tunneled. You gave her $15,000 without telling me? It wasn't like that. His voice was pleading now, desperate to make me understand. They made it sound temporary. They said she'd pay it back. They said I was the only one who could help her. Did she pay it back? Silence. Robert, did she ever pay it back?
No.
The word came out like a confession, but by the time I realized she wasn't going to, it was too late. My mom started calling me every week, saying Annie was struggling, that she couldn't afford groceries, that her mental health was deteriorating. What was I supposed to do? Tell them no? Let my sister starve. She wouldn't have starved, Robert. She had a job. She had friends. She had a support system that didn't include me subsidizing her lifestyle. But you never even gave me the chance to say no. He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet. I was scared. Of what? Of you leaving, of you seeing what I really was, the coward, a failure, someone who couldn't protect his own wife from his own family. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I kept thinking if I just managed the money quietly, kept you out of it, you'd never have to know, and then I wouldn't have to face what I was doing. And yet here we are. Here we are. His voice cracked. I had to look away. The anger was still there, burning beneath my ribs, but it was tangled with something else now. Pity maybe, or exhaustion, or both. When did you realize you were being lied to? Robert blinked. What do you mean? About the money, the account names, the fact that every payment went straight to Annie, not to your parents. He stopped. I didn't realize that until last week. I thought the money was going to Mom and Dad. I didn't know they were funneling it to her. That's not what your notebook says. What notebook? I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo of his handwritten entry. If Beck finds out, she'll leave. I have to be smarter. Robert stared at the screen like it was evidence of his own execution. That's not, he started. Don't lie to me now, Robert. Not after you just started telling the truth. He rubbed his face again, more violently this time. That notebook was from a year ago. I just found out Mom had been lying to me about some of the money. I confronted her, and she said I was being paranoid. She said I'd always been suspicious of Annie, that I didn't love my sister enough. And I thought if you found out, you'd think I was just as bad as they were, that I'd been complicit in something awful, and I didn't know how to explain it. So you wrote it down instead. I was trying to figure it out, how to fix it, how to stop it, how to tell you without making you hate me. Robert, I set the phone down and looked at him. I need to know one thing, and if you lie to me, we're done. Permanently. Do you understand? He nodded slowly. Did you ever suspect they were taking money from us intentionally? Did you ever think, even for a moment, that this wasn't about helping them survive, that it was about helping them maintain a lifestyle for Annie? Robert opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Yes, he said. I suspected. I suspected for years. I just didn't want to believe it. Something in me shifted. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet, but recognition. He'd known. He'd been carrying this shame, this secret, this unbearable weight of understanding exactly who his family was, and he buried it so deep he'd almost convinced himself he didn't know. Why? I asked. Why didn't you just tell me? Because if I told you, he said, then it was real. And if it was real, then I had to do something about it. And if I did something about it, I'd lose them. And I can't, he choked on the words. I'm not strong enough to lose everyone. Except me, I said quietly. You were always willing to lose me. Robert broke. He doubled over, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. I'd never seen him cry before. Not like this, not with his whole body. IT should have moved me. It should have made me want to comfort him. Instead, I just watched. He left an hour later. We'd run out of words. I'd run out of patience. He'd run out of excuses. After he was gone, I sat on the stairs outside my parents' house and called Jenna back. I need more, I told her. I need to know how deep this goes. How deep do you think it goes? Annie's lifestyle, the expensive car, the vacations, the money she's been spending on decorations for the baby room. There's no way that's just coming from her parents' retirement fund. She has to have other sources. Jenna was quiet for a moment. Are you ready for what I might find? I don't know, but I need to know anyway. Okay, give me a few days. The days that followed were strange. I stayed at my parents' house, but I wasn't just hiding anymore. I was researching, planning. Building a case that went beyond the lamb, beyond the money, into the entire architecture of the Hayes family dysfunction. I talked to my kids separately. Both were grown, in their early 20s, living in other states. My daughter, Maya, listened to everything I said and then asked, Mom, why didn't you leave sooner? That question haunted me more than anything. I thought I was being strong, I told her. I thought if I just tried harder, it would get better. That's not strength, Mom. That's survival. And survival isn't the same as living. My son, Daniel, was more pragmatic. You need a lawyer, he said flatly. And you need to lock down your assets. Dad's not a bad guy, but he's weak. And weak people make bad decisions when they're scared. He wasn't wrong. I started looking into divorce attorneys, not because I'd made up my mind, but because I needed to know what my options were. I needed to understand what I would be walking into if I decided to leave for good. Every attorney I called said roughly the same thing. Your case is messy, but it's not unusual. The financial abuse, the manipulation, the emotional betrayal, they'd seen versions of the story before. The question wasn't whether I could win. The question was whether I wanted to fight. On Friday morning, Jenna called me with a second bombshell. Rebecca, you're not going to like this. Just tell me. I traced the outgoing transfers from Annie's account. She's been paying off credit cards, car loans, and something that looks like a personal loan for a business venture that didn't work out. But there's more. More how? The account you've been paying into, the one in Annie's name, it's also receiving money from a third source, a separate account, and I traced it back to Margaret and Harold's joint retirement fund. I held the phone tighter. So they've been sending their own money to her too. Yes, but here's the part you won't like. They've been doing it for 8 years, long before you and Robert started giving them monthly support, and the amounts have been increasing steadily. Harold is nearly 70-2. At the rate they're draining that retirement fund. It'll be empty within 2 years. And when it's empty, where do you think they're going to turn? The answer was obvious.
Me.
They were going to turn to me, Robert's wife, the family safety net, the one who'd always kept her mouth shut and her checkbook open. I need to know one more thing, I said. Can you find out if Robert has any accounts I don't know about? Jenna hesitated. That's more complicated. I'll need access to his personal info. Whatever you need, I'll get it. That afternoon, I went back to our house, the one we'd shared for 12 years, the one Robert was still living in alone, and I told myself I was picking up more clothes. The real reason was to look for anything else he might have hidden. I found it in his nightstand drawer, behind a stack of old insurance papers. A second bank statement, from an account I didn't recognize. The balance was over $30,000. I sat down on the bed, my legs suddenly weak. Robert had told me our savings were depleted. He'd shown me the joint account statements to prove it. He'd made me feel like we were barely scraping by, like my contributions were the only thing keeping us afloat. And all along, he'd had a secret account, an account he'd been funneling money into for God knows how long. Maybe before the kids went to college, maybe before a marriage, maybe his entire adult life. I snapped a photo of the statement. Then I took the statement itself, the original paper, and put it in my bag. When I walked out of the house, I didn't look back. That night, I met Robert at a coffee shop near his office. Neutral ground, I didn't want to have this conversation in my parents' house, where they could hear every word. And I didn't want to have it in his face, where he might feel cornered. He looked older. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper, his hair grayer than it had been a week ago. Grief was aging him, and part of me felt sorry for that. The other part, the part that I'd found his secret account, felt nothing. What's this? I pushed the photo across the table. Robert stared at it. His face went through 3 stages: confusion, recognition, and then a kind of horrible resignation. I can explain, he said. Then explain. That's my premarital savings. I opened it before we got married. When we combined our finances, I just never closed it. You never told